Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a letter from a fan. Haven't done one of these in a while, but it's been a little bit of time since I got a letter that stopped me in my tracks. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor over here, the good people over at Ridge Wallet. They make these nifty, metal-plated, minimalist wallets that kind of hold your cards very nicely. If you would like to grab one of these for yourself, you can hit up the link down there in the description and use promo code FANTANO to get 10% off of your wallet or anything else that they have on the site, I believe. All right, let's get into it. This letter is written by Sandy from Glasgow. Sandy writes, regarding personality in music, to what degree is this a good thing? I've heard you and others describe music that lacks personality as generic and lifeless, but there are some artists whose work puts their persona very much center stage, either through political views, name-dropping, lifestyle celebration, or whatever. Some people may feel this is less about being a musician and more about being a celebrity selling themselves as a self-aware facet of popular culture. And some people absolutely love that, but does this diminish their musical/artistic merit, especially when musical content on a track is pretty thin? There's a line of thought stating that all forms of art are an act to some extent, but that is a whole other argument. At the other end of the scale, I'm sure there are some fans of indie artists who consider themselves in this bracket and are all about the music, man, but in truth are drawn to their favorite artist's personality more than anything else, as portrayed through lyrical perspectives, timbre choices, to a degree where they are suddenly more receptive to different genres when said musician experiments a bit, e.g. Arctic Monkeys. Are there certain artists whose music can be enjoyed on a purely technical level, like, I don't know, Aphex Twin or something, or is personality still making itself apparent here through compositional/instrumental choices? Does decent quality music intrinsically have to convey personality to stand out and gain a following? And is it even possible to have good personality-free music? Thanks for taking the time to read this, etc., etc. Thank you very much, Sandy, for writing. Good question. Good thoughts, and let me try to respond here. I think what you've written here exposes a bit of confusion that maybe I and other people who do album reviews need to kind of clarify on when it comes to using the word personality when describing a record. Because when I say a record has personality, I guess I don't literally mean that that person has a personality, or rather that record has a personality in the same way that a literal person might have personality. A literal person might put some of their personality into their music, but I don't mean that that music has personality just like the person does. I mean, the music is a static piece of art. It's a statement. It's not as dynamic. It's not living and breathing in the same way that a person with a persona does. But when I say that a piece of music has personality, I guess I interchangeably mean to state that that piece of music, that album, that song, that whatever, has a distinct style, aesthetic. There is something instantly recognizable about that album, that piece of music, much in the same way that I recognize Kanye's style, I recognize his delivery, I recognize his production style, I recognize his rap style, much in the same way that I would recognize Kanye's face if I see a picture of his face. When I say a piece of music or an artist's musical talents have personality, it's almost like that piece of music has a thumbprint to it that is like no other thumbprint and has certain qualities to it that are specific to that piece of work, to that artist's work, to that artist's style. Now, I do get what you're saying here in terms of like, there's definitely a line one could cross with putting their personality into their music where you're literally rapping about, again, that person's celebrity, that person's, I guess, life decisions or life occurrences, where maybe the music is so persona-driven, the music becomes a cult of personality. I would say maybe a few examples of this to go back to Kanye. I would say that Yeezus is an example of an album that is very cult of personality driven. Now that could be for good reasons or bad reasons, or it depends on how you interpret it. But I think the album is very, very cult of personality driven. Conversely, I think like let's say for example, College Dropout is still an album that has a lot of personality. That album has personality to it, But I think a lot of that album's statements are not necessarily purely about sort of what Kanye is doing or what is going on in Kanye internally. So that is a record that still has a lot of personality, still has a lot of distinct characteristics to it, still a lot of stuff about it that is instantly recognizable as, oh, that's a Kanye lyric, that's a Kanye flow, that is a Kanye beat. Instantly recognizable as having Kanye's thumbprint on it, Kanye's influence on it. But I would say that there are certain degrees to which one could incorporate their personality into their music. Another artist whose music I think has a lot of personality, but may not necessarily, at least for a lot of the music that came out during his artistic peak, has a lot of personality to it, but not necessarily a cult of personality. Let's say David Bowie. I would actually say that, for a record to have personality and maybe even cult of personality, or a lot of examples of that, don't just exist in hip hop, but also the rock and pop world in the crop of rock stars that have culminated over the past several decades. I mean, let's say Axl Rose or Slash. There's certainly personality and cult of personality to the music that those artists release. I would say maybe even Alice Cooper is another example of that. Ozzy is another example of that. Maybe the things that they sing about or the things that they make songs about aren't so hyper literal that they are rapping about the lifestyle that they live in the same way that a rap artist would. But honestly, at the end of the day, I don't see that as anything more than just a difference of artistic choice, Now, to sort of address one of your later points over here, you have examples of artists who don't necessarily put their literal personality into their music. You have Aphex Twin. You have, let's say, Daft Punk or MF Doom, who in their music kind of come up with characters. Like, there are lyrics in their music, but they come up with characters and stories and scenarios that play out in their records. That don't necessarily reflect them personally in a literal way. I would still argue that their music has personality too. I would also argue that, even a band like Animals as Leaders, let's say. A lot of people probably wouldn't consider Animals as Leaders a very personality-driven band, but I feel like their records do have personality to them because, as you state here, I do think that instrument choices, production choices, compositional choices, if those choices are unique and set you apart from other artists in your field, I do think that contributes to the personality of an album. It contributes to the distinct characteristics of that record. To the degree any of this is really a good or a bad thing, I think is in the eye of the beholder, is in the ear of the listener. I think maybe an obvious line to be crossed on both ends of that spectrum is, when you absolutely have no personality, so much that there's really nothing distinct about what you're doing. If somebody asked me to pick your record, pick your song, pick your style, pick your voice out of a lineup, I absolutely could not for the life of me do it. That's obviously a bad thing. Like if there are literally no defining qualities about what you do to the point where there's literally nothing I could recall about it, that's obviously going so far down the road of a lack of personality that there's nothing compelling about what you do. And then there is going so far down the road of chalking your music full of personality, chalking your music full of you and everything you think and everything you do, to the point where it becomes only truly relatable to you. It becomes this egotistical jerk off. And the music, of course, has to be completely unsubstantial. There's nothing entertaining or energetic or exciting or catchy about any of it. Really, all of it is about you, and any and other quality about the music that you could be working on ends up getting kind of thrown out or neglected or overlooked at the sacrifice of making sure that everything and anything about the album is about you, point blank, period. There are lots of records that get painfully indulgent because maybe an artist is so sucked into their own personality, their own greatness, their own image of themselves, that the quality of the album overall kind of suffers. I think there are actually a lot of ways that too much personality, obsession with one's personality could manifest itself negatively in a piece of music, in a song, in an album. Having no personality, how that plays out, I think is pretty clear. I don't know if the dynamics of that are that varied, but I think there are lots of ways in which obsession with one's personality, or rather too much personality, however you want to phrase it, can fuck up a piece of music and fuck up an album. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. So hopefully I've answered your question here, and I've addressed what exactly you were getting at the heart of, and I've kind of illustrated what exactly I'm intending to communicate when I say a piece of music has personality to it. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. You can hit the link to subscribe to the channel too. And once more, shout out to the good people over at Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this video, continuing to sponsor this channel. And again, you can find their link down there in the description box with promo code Fantano. Anthony Fantano, forever.